David Fincher is one of my all-time favorite directors, and his latest movie, The Killer, starring Michael Fassbender, just dropped on Netflix. I've got some thoughts, wanted to give you my review today, but like always, welcome back to The Haunted Beard, everybody. My name is Jake. Thank you for joining me. It's all horror and thriller movie content on my channel, so listen, do not click that subscribe button unless you want to be haunted by the beard. After a fateful near miss, an assassin battles his employers and himself on an international manhunt he insists isn't personal. So The Killer tells its story in 6 chapters, and it opens up in Paris as we see Michael Fassbender camped out in this high-rise, looks like an apartment room, waiting for his target to arrive so he can assassinate him. And this opening chapter really sets up the tone and the atmosphere for pretty much the rest of the entire movie, as this is more of a grounded, kind of realistic, bit of a slower-paced type hitman crime thriller. I would say probably 80%, if not more, of Michael Fassbender's lines are delivered via voiceover, and in this opening chapter, it really kind of spends some time getting into his headspace, and he talks about just his life philosophy and just kind of random things that sort of interest him and how he goes about his hitman jobs. And so The Killer is really interested in getting into this sort of methodical process. It's interested first and foremost in its character and kind of how he operates and his mentality, and then everything kind of flows out of that. And if you've seen any of David Fincher's movies, for the most part, The Killer looks a lot like his other films, as it just kind of has this cold, sleek, stylish sort of look to it. Just the color palette of the movie, it just looks really nice and is reminiscent of a Fincher movie, as you get a lot of dark blacks mixed in with these kind of lighter, almost gold colors. There's a little bit of like navy blues and teal colors mixed in as well. And so there's definitely a sort of visual style to this that is reminiscent of his other movies. Lots of silhouettes and stuff like that as well. Once you get into the second chapter of the movie, it really kind of brings in a little bit of humanity to our lead character, as there's a little bit more to him than this cold-hearted, emotionless killer. And so you get a little bit of humanity in there, and then that really sets up the rest of the movie, as this more or less becomes kind of this revenge-type story. In addition to Fassbender's performance and just the visual presentation of the movie, one of the things that I think works quite well is how the story is told. There is really no exposition. There's never a scene in this movie where you kind of sit down and things are explained to you, or the plot is very clearly laid out in terms of, you know, this is where we're supposed to go, this is what we're supposed to do. We're kind of just along for this ride as we follow Fassbender's character, and the entire movie is really presented through his sort of perspective, and we're just following him around, watching him work and watching him do what he does. And so because most of the lines are voiceover and there's really not much interaction with other characters, there's not a whole lot of information that's presented to us as the audience. And so sometimes Fassbender will do things or go places, and we're not entirely sure why he's doing that or going there until we actually figure out. There's one scene in the movie where he quickly goes to this like grocery store to buy a bunch of sleeping pills and a bunch of ground beef. And you're kind of like, what does that have to do with anything? We're not really sure up until he actually uses it. And you're like, oh, okay. And so it kind of keeps you on your toes throughout the movie, as just in the way it's presented, you're just kind of along for this ride. The highlight for me is in chapter 4, and there is this hand-to-hand combat fight scene that I thought was absolutely fantastic. One of the highlight scenes of the year. It is an awesome scene as he breaks into this guy's apartment, and man, these guys go at it. And the way Fincher shoots this is great, but the sound design of this sequence is just fantastic. It gives this sort of low, distorted, sort of hum, bassy, thudding kind of sound effect throughout all of it. And man, I just thought it worked really well. Just in terms of how the fight scene is choreographed, it's just very well done, very believable. No CGI nonsense like Fassbender and this guy really go at it. At least it certainly seems like they did. I thought it was just excellent and just very well done. Overall, there's a lot to like about The Killer, especially if you are a David Fincher fan. You're definitely going to get something out of this. However, I would say in the end, I felt like it did lack a little bit of emotional resonance. It's not quite up to the level of some of his greatest films, talking things like Seven or Fight Club, things like that, to where you get done watching those movies and you kind of are just like, whoa, this doesn't quite hit that level. And I think part of that has to do with just the overall story. It is a pretty familiar story that we have seen before. So there's not really that much innovation in terms of the narrative. I mean, if you compare this movie to something like Zodiac, that movie is way more complex. There's just a lot more layers and depth and details to that compared to something like this is just a little more simplistic and straightforward. And also too, I had a bit of an issue with the ending. It left me a little bit unsatisfied, and I won't give any spoilers or anything away, but I'll just say there was a decision that was made that I didn't quite understand. And I'm not really sure why this character did this when it seems like they would have done something different. And I'll just keep it very vague. But yeah, overall, this is a good film. In terms of, if I'm just looking at like how well executed and directed it is, it's like an 8.5 to a 9. If I'm talking about my own kind of personal score with just how much I enjoyed it and how much kind of resonance it has and staying power, I'm probably more to like a 7.5, maybe an 8 out of 10. So overall, like I said, if you're a Fincher fan, I definitely think you're going to like this. There's quite a bit to appreciate. I do think it's a good film, and I quite enjoyed it. It's just not quite at the level of his greatest work, but still a good time overall. So those are my thoughts on The Killer. Hit me up down below like always. Would love to know your thoughts. Would love to hear from you. That is all I got for you today. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I greatly appreciate it, and I will see you next time on The Haunted Beard.